Okay, ladies and gentlemen, a little better late than never this evening. Coming in for the last car disqualification show. I know that the tech inspection results have just come in, but I just now got finished watching the race here. So I want to make sure I catch up with everybody. I'm going to post the link here since we're just getting back in action. As you can see, fortunately, so far, the electricity is on here at Last Car headquarters. We had to do a bit of moving around because I was at a different location that was caught up in the power outages. So we are now here and we will get started in just a moment. Let's see. Tech results are in, but the show is still here to wrap up the action from Martinsville. Alrighty. Oop. There it is. Okay. Let's see. Let's get the chat list up here. Make sure that's all set. Okay. Alrighty. So, it's just short track racing. I think that's the quote from today here. Just catching up on the finish there from Martinsville, the first race of the round of 8. Obviously, technical inspection results are in. About an hour ago, Bob Pockris posted a tweet there saying that no technical issues. Martin Truex Jr. officially your winner, which means that Jimmy Johnson is your last place finisher for today. A very rare missed performance there for him, given that Jimmy's long history of being very good at Martinsville and one of very few last place finishes he's had in his career. We'll have some more information on that as we go along. We'll have the full Cup article posted later tonight. I do apologize that we didn't do the lap by lap updates we usually do for previous races. We'll be returning to that at Texas, subject to, of course, the persistent power outages we're having over out here in California. But definitely want to make sure just to jump in. This is gonna be a bit of a shorter show since we're not waiting on the clock here for inspection, but definitely want to make sure to talk about no shortage of things to talk about from the races this weekend in Martinsville. Let me pull up the statistics here in the meantime, and we'll certainly get into that as well as everything that happened in the Truck Series race, or what we were able to see in the truck race rather yesterday at the same time. So from as far as I could tell, I was listening to the MRN broadcast for the start of the Martinsville race, and it said that originally that Garrett Smithley had some smoke coming from the left front fender at the start of the race, the pace laps. He, however, was not the last place qualifier. BJ McLeod got dropped to the back of the field there after being one of the drivers that had failed technical inspection prior to the race. McLeod started in the back. Smithley, however, was one of the first to be lapped. Timmy Hill dropped to the back after that point there, lost a number of laps, spent a couple of trips in the garage area. Not sure what the reason was, but just, again, this is the frustrating thing from just catching up on the TV broadcast. There's so much that they don't really show you, and one could, guess any mechanical issue in particular, but it's not particularly clear. Certainly didn't seem to be crash damage, as the car, the number 77, seemed to be in good shape. But obviously, 77 had a lot of struggles last week at Kansas as well, with Timmy Hill driving. Spire Motorsports team just kind of off the pace here lately. They dropped down several laps. It looked like they were going to finish multiple laps down. I believe they were about 26, 27 laps down coming back out there, getting up to about 30 laps down to the halfway point. And then we have an accident off of turn 4. Kyle Busch tangles up with Aric Almirola. Big pileup ensues from there. Among those that are collected in the accident are Jimmy Johnson and Almirola himself. Johnson and Almirola have the most serious damage, although it's a little bit hard. It was a little hard to tell how much damage Jimmy actually had with the black paint scheme and the encroaching darkness of the race. Regardless, Jimmy was out of the race at that point, and Almirola was out as well. Johnson dropped down to the back of the field. But in between, he had to actually take the last spot from his teammate, Chase Elliott, who had a fractured axle earlier on a pit stop. Between Timmy Hill's issues and Jimmy Johnson's issues, Chase Elliott held last place for a good portion of the 2/3 mark of the race thereabouts. Was holding the bottom spot there, spent a trip to the garage area, came back out, and ended up finishing the race under power. You see him pulling over to let the leaders go by in the final stages. He ends up completing 445 of the 500 laps, finishing the last car to run under power. However, Jimmy Johnson and Almirola both slipped behind him in the final stages, and Jimmy Johnson gets the last place finish. So let me get the results here. Let me show the recovered ones here. Whoop, hang on. Where'd it go? Doot. There we go. There we go. Had to reboot this thing on top of everything else. Okay, yeah, here we go. So the statistic that we're going to be using here for the article on the Cup Series side is the first last place finish for car number 48 at Martinsville since October 28th, 1956, when Jimmy Llewellyn finished last in the race after 11 laps in that event. We'll have more information on that statistic as we go along in the article. Also digging up some more information on that. We'll get that posted tonight, as well as a Truck Series article on Cody McMahon, who had a very brief race in Saturday's race in the Truck Series side. And so all that will be covered on the site there as well. Let's see. Let's see. Yeah, an unusual deal there with Jimmy Johnson's last place finish. It seemed to kind of slip past a lot of the broadcasters too. Did they ever have an interview with Johnson coming out of the infield care center? I didn't see anything like that in the broadcast. I imagine they probably would have because they talked to Almirola at that one point. But yeah, that's always kind of that deal. But an interesting battle again between, of course, the thing that's going to be stealing all the headlines from even beyond that is the fisticuffs there after the race between Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin, two drivers who seem to lately be the super speedway champions of the series. It seems like the two of them always seem to be consistent contenders for the Daytona 500 in recent years, which is surprising since both of them really struggled at that track in the early part of when they were in the Cup Series. Even stepping aside Denny Hamlin's victory in the Bud Shootout in his rookie season. But yeah, pretty crazy deal there. But a lot of fun in that one. I mean, even in spite of, once again, a very dominant performance by Martin Truex Jr., much like we saw with Brad Keselowski in the spring race, how much of that is a consequence of the aero package or whatever else continuing to rear its ugly head there this season. I know that we've seen a lot with the different aero packages and how they've affected tracks that typically you don't really hear conversation about aero push or the aerodynamic factor at all. But even if you have a situation where Kyle Busch gets in that wreck with Almirola, rips the fender off, and now suddenly they're talking about the car not being very aerodynamic out there, that's definitely kind of changed the complexion of things. And I think it's strange to have the racing play out that way. And I don't know how much is, I mean, I would imagine between Martin Truex Jr. being dominant in his Toyota for Joe Gibbs Racing versus Penske's Ford there with Brad Keselowski, it's not just so much one team really hitting on the combination. I would say that seems to be more of a consequence of that package, and unfortunate, much like, I couldn't help but think with William Byron having, again, a career run for him after having all those great runs at the road courses this year, translating that to a great run at Martinsville there. Just couldn't quite do anything with Truex there at the finish of the race, but a fantastic run for the driver in the number 24 car. Byron doing a great job out there, just doing the very best that he could out there, and trying to get a good performance. But it seems like much like Truex's frustration chasing down Chase Elliott back at Watkins Glen earlier this year, that it was very much a challenge for any of these guys to actually get around somebody, like they can actually hound them for a bit and try to make it look good and everything, but actually stepping out and making a pass, similar to what we saw with Bowman and Kyle Larson back earlier this year, didn't quite shake out that way. Yeah, Denny Hamlin seemed to have a real bad push in his car during the race too. I think, as good as his car was, it seemed like a lot of times he was just over driving the car or it just wouldn't stick. I don't know how much, they kept saying how hot the track was. It was the hottest since Rusty Wallace's victory, his final victory in April of 2004. If the car just wouldn't get into the track very good and slip up the track, or if it was something like that. You think back to his tangle with Chase Elliott, and it seemed like from the crowd reaction to hearing Hamlin over the loudspeaker, seemed like a lot of the folks there still hold a grudge for Hamlin on that one. But it seemed like but certainly the thing that can't be overlooked with Hamlin's performance today was his pit crew. You think back even further back into Hamlin's career, you go back to 2006, 2007, when he was starting out, he was very critical of his pit crews back then. And I recall several instances at Martinsville itself where he would, much like today, continue to lose spots. And it was really hard to kind of pick out what was going on because the coverage that NBC was providing wasn't very good at actually dissecting the pit stop and going back and figuring out what was going wrong with Hamlin's crew. That was clearly a big storyline that was developing in spite of Hamlin being the pole sitter and having one of the best cars in the field. That those pit stops were consistently dropping him back. From what I could see in the replays, it seemed like during the last couple of pit stops in particular, I think the next to last one he had, his jackman seemed to be going really slow around the car. And I was wondering if maybe he was hurt or something like that, or if he just was out of his rhythm or something. But they were just really slow. Like they were just working on like the left side tires when they were already crossing the 10-second barrier. So there's no way they're going to get down in 12, 13 seconds. But big issues on that end. And then like on the last stop, it seemed like they just couldn't get the tires off the car. And every time, I mean, I was amazed. He only lost like one spot at the end of the on that last stop, but he would already fallen back to like fourth or fifth at that point. Clearly a lot of frustrations going on in that whole deal there. And unfortunate situation for Hamlin. It's something they definitely can't afford going down the stretch. I know Rusty Wallace was pointing that out pretty critically over the MRN broadcast as well early on, that those are mistakes you just can't afford in a championship. I mean, that can make all the difference. And certainly it made the difference in terms of him being a contender, actually going for the lead in the race versus actually just being kind of an also-ran in the event. So unfortunate deal there for Denny Hamlin, but ultimately not out of the championship contention there. Chase Elliott, of course, with his fractured axle, very knocking him out of what was going to be a very interesting spirited charge from the back of the field up into the top 10. Had about an 8th place car, it seemed like, for most of the first part of the race. Maybe not much more than that, depending on how well he would have done at night. But definitely not the kind of run they were looking for, and dropping him further back in the field. Clint Boyer also having a whole lot of struggles out there. My goodness, the wheels have quite literally fallen off there at the number 14 car after his elimination at Kansas. Much like some of the other struggles we saw with him in the first part of the season, those two separate occasions, staying out on flat tires and completely missing the entrance to pit road, and then spinning out and drawing cautions. Just a really crazy situation on that. But an unfortunate deal there for Boyer and for a lot of contenders out there. Eric Jones continuing to struggle the latter part of the season here, falling back the points after his elimination in the first round. Lots of problems there on the number 20 team. Hopefully they can get those fixed up as he picks up that ride again next year. Lots of things going on with that. But yeah, a lot of the battle between Joey Logano and Denny Hamlin. Yeah, I mean, it's being pointed out a lot in the chat, and you're correct. There are a lot of drivers that Hamlin seemed to be crossing the nose of. It almost seemed like it was going to be a situation with Keselowski, with other contenders further back in the field. I mean, memory fails, but I mean, definitely Keselowski and Logano there at Penske. That was definitely how that all shook out. But we'll see what happens at Texas coming up, because quite honestly, I mean, Hamlin is particularly good at Texas, having won the spring race here. And he's come through in the past, I believe, in his championship run. The last championship run he had that went about as well as this one has back in 2010. He was doing really well at Texas there and pulled off a victory. I believe he was racing Matt Kenseth in that one, if I remember. That was years ago. I remember doing a starting grid for that quite a while ago. Still a 4th place finish for him. The pole, getting some points there. He gets 45 points in total, which is the same amount of points that William Byron got for finishing second. Martin Truex widens the gap there with 60 points for him. You look further back, several other contenders that were doing really well. Bubba Wallace in the 13th spot, great run for him, was flirting with the top 10. There was getting a lot of great screen time there. Running about the 11th spot, several points there with even with some damage there to the quarter panel. So great run for him. Chris Buescher, I thought he was a lap down for a lot of this race. Turned out he was not. He got back onto the lead lap and charged his way up there to the 12th place finish there. So great run in one of his last starts for JTG Daugherty Racing. Very surprised to see Ricky Stenhouse Jr. up there in the 15th spot. Stenhouse is really Martinsville is not really one of his best tracks. I believe, in fact, one of his last place finishes came here just a few years ago. So to see him come back from a lot of struggles in the early laps, had a battle there with Austin Dillon at one point, finishing the 15th spot. Really pleased. Got to give a particular shout out to Corey LaJoie there, finishing in the 18th spot. Ends up finishing on the lead lap, was running on the lead lap for much of that race, as high as 17th. And the number 32, the great Mystery Machine paint scheme. Again, big fan over here. Thinking back to the old Cartoon Network wacky racing schemes. I mean, these are paint schemes that we need to see much more often. A lot of fun out there, and seemed to be returning a lot of heads during the weekend. So it was fantastic to see that run. I was thinking coming into that race that knowing the history of the Mystery Machine, it has an unfortunate history of breaking down in front of haunted houses. Glad that was not the case for the number 32 this time around. In fact, Chase Elliott seemed to have much more problems with that than Corey LaJoie did. Matt DiBenedetto, it seemed like he had a significant amount of damage in the Jimmy Johnson accident. I was very surprised to see him end up getting 16th at the end of the day. Daniel Hemrick right behind him in 17th, didn't have a sponsor this week. The Chevrolet accessories thing jumping on board, much like we've seen with Richard Childress Racing in the past. But he was doing better than I believe expected at this point. Unfortunately, Michael McDowell slipped back to 23rd after a great 5th place qualifying run. The A&W paint scheme is always one that stands out over the track. I believe the gentleman that designed the Corey LaJoie paint scheme did that on the 34. He also did the number 52. So great job. I mean, love to see a lot of great colorful paint schemes out there. And the great thing with Martinsville is you get to see these paint schemes a lot of times because lap traffic is near constant at that track and the speeds are slow enough and the camera angle is close enough that you usually see a good number of them there. And this is what makes these Martinsville races so much fun to watch, no matter how many times. Bubba Wallace had a bit of another tangle with Alex Bowman. For those of you who have listened to Dale Jr.'s most recent, well, not the most recent podcast, but the one before that, with Bubba talking about his rivalry with Alex Bowman, and one where, perhaps not a full-on heated rivalry, but just a driver where he doesn't really say much to him and just kind of, keeps walking. Ark Almirola, I believe, is another driver he mentioned in that context. Definitely seemed like there was something more factoring into that again, because the 88 and the 43 tangled again. And Bowman ends up tangling with Daniel Suarez and damaging his car further. Bowman having a difficult run on top of a flat tire in the early stages there that dropped him in the back of the field. Let's see here. Looking through the rest of the field, good to see Ryan Newman do well again. Not letting the elimination back at Kansas, or at the Roval, get him down. On top of his runner-up finish at Talladega, he finishes 10th in the school bus car. Good kudos to Newman's fans and other social media members there for petitioning to get that stop sign on the driver's side of the car. That was a very nice touch. Definitely seemed to be a factor, not surprisingly perhaps, in his battle with Kyle Busch there at the finish. Kyle ends up dropping 4 spots behind him in the 14th position at the finish of the race. Looking at other ones, big kudos to Kevin Harvick as well. I gotta say, the move of the race, I would say, on top, even though Martin Truex was pretty much dominant at the start of the field, I would say Harvick's ability to create a moving chicane out of that pileup on the front straightaway was darn impressive. That move that he made off of turn 4, juking to the right and then juking to the left rather, and then back to the right again to getting around that pileup was really amazing. So definitely that replay was definitely worth rewatching there in the process. David Reagan, good run for him in the 11th spot. He's very quietly had some good runs in Martinsville in the past. Unfortunately, he's had some difficult runs and some last place finishes there as well. But it's some good runs as well at the same time there for Front Row Motorsports. So good to see him finish in the 11th position behind Newman and ahead of Chris Buescher. So good runs for all of them. But Jimmy Johnson article coming up later tonight, and we'll get covered in that pretty soon. All right, let's jump into this. We'll do some trivia as part of this too. I know we'll jump into that pretty quickly here since we're pretty much wrapped up the action from here. While I have this on the mic here, I'll also confirm somebody was asking about Phoenix on here. I did receive confirmation just today that my credentials have been approved. So big thanks to the folks at the ISM Raceway. Very thankful to be able to cover that event. They have a beautiful facility down there. They were extremely welcoming and inviting to myself there at the track last year. So we're going to be covering the action out there for you guys in the garage area in a couple of weeks. We have already ordered the magnet that's going to be on the car door that we're going to drive from here at Last Car headquarters down to Avondale and back. And so we're going to do the exact same thing that we did at Darlington. Everybody whose name is already on the magnet is already entered. And anybody else who joins up along the way between now and when we basically when the race starts, the Cup race itself starts, we'll write your name on there and you'll be entered in the drawing as well. And it's gonna be a lot of fun. So we'll have you guys along with us. We'll take some more pictures on the road trip down south, and we'll have a lot of fun with that. So look forward to that in the next couple of weeks. And there'll be some really interesting stories. The triple header weekend between the Truck Series, the Xfinity Series, and the Cup Series is a big one to big fun thing to cover. The Truck Series race last year at Phoenix was the first truck race I'd actually attended in person, and it was a lot of fun there. Good to see these competitors in person, and a good follow up for what we saw at Mosport earlier this year, this past summer. And we have a lot of work on that. So look forward to some bonus content on there. We're gonna do a lot more of the social media on that. Like I say, both between our trip as well as any other information on the website along the way. And we're going to get some more, just get some more interviews and everything in person there. And of course, not the least of which being the battle for last place for all three of those series, which are all getting very close to a championship settling moment there. We're going to get some championship scenarios broken down for you for the Truck Series one. I believe the Cup Series one as well is getting pretty close to being settled as well. So we'll get all that updated for you in the weeks ahead. So again, actually just very couple weeks here ahead, we're going to get going on that. So thank you very much on that. All right. Let's get into the Truck Series race and we'll talk about that. We'll have to talk about it because there was no shortage of things from that. Now, we were able to do the live tweets and stuff we did from there, and that turned out to be the crazier of the two races. So that was time well spent on that for sure. The situation there from the very beginning, first of all, big thanks to everybody that contributed pictures for the article. We had no less than 4 different viewers provide pictures for the article that's going to be posted tonight about Cody McMahon and his run in the Truck Series race, which is astounding if you consider the fact that, I mean, not just only from the support from viewers like yourselves and how many people are contributing pictures, but how quickly that people would have to get those pictures, given that he didn't complete a single lap. So big kudos to everybody that contributed on that. I want to plug their Twitter accounts right here. First is at Wookie Atomo TV. Second one is at NASCAR Catholic. The third is at Mike Motorsport. And the fourth is at Motorsport Rev. So big thanks to those 4. Give them all a follow there if you could. And very good supporters there over the site. I believe all of them actually have contributed pictures for the website before. And this is again an open invitation for all of you out there. If you're attending a race there, especially these Cup races here, Cup, Xfinity, and Truck, and you get some great pictures of these drivers in there. Unfortunately, we can't be at all these events. But for any of you guys that are able to be, that's always a huge help. I get a whole lot of information out of pictures, and it really helps give a lot more context to a story rather than just saying, oh, he finished last and that was the end of it. Clearly, as you see in a lot of these articles we posted these 10 years, there's a lot of interesting things that happen behind the scenes that just don't get talked about. And information like that is always appreciated, and we're always certainly open to that. So, of course, that includes next week at Texas. So if you're in Texas, definitely keep an eye out for all that action there. But let's get into the Truck Series race, and we'll get into the elephant in the room in just a little bit. Let's give a shout out here. First of all, we'll start off on a positive note here with all the great runs here at the front of the field. Timmy Hill, first of all, the Hill Motorsports team just springing up this year, running their father Jerry Hill's old number 56 on the truck. Timmy Hill dodges the big pileup coming off of turn 2, comes home in the 5th position, his best ever finish in the Truck Series. This continues a fantastic season for Hill this year, where he not only was the top 10 over at Bristol, driving a Carl Long car that only needed new tires to go faster, supplied by the Hattori team, getting into the top 10. Hill himself in the number 66 as well. Had a very good run in the Daytona night race before he was collected in a late race accident, not of his own doing. Great run for him and a great run for that team. Certainly hoping that they're going to be at the ISM Raceway, because it'd be great to see that truck in action firsthand. Actually, I believe, if I remember correctly, they're doing, oh gosh, when was the one that they're doing Carson Hocevar's run? Was that Phoenix or was that Homestead? I got to look that up. I know that Carson Hocevar is going to be running the 56 at some point. Let me verify that. Okay, yes, yeah, the 56 will be running at the ISM Raceway, but apparently it's a partnership with Jordan Anderson, very similar to the 56 that ran back at Mosport when the Roger Roos was running with his brother Bobby there at the track. So the 56 will be running that weekend. And we'll see what Timmy's doing there in the meantime. Always a great person to talk to along the way there at the track. Very friendly person. Highly recommended to talk to him. John Hunter Nemechek had serious damage in an early accident, rebounds to finish in the 7th position. Danny Bone in his first ever Truck Series start, transitioning from the short track ranks up into the Truck Series. He takes over the number 30 for Brennan Poole. The On Point Motorsports entry. On Point Motorsports also involved in modified racing. I don't know if that's how the relationship with Bone began, or if it was very just a coincidence on that side. But regardless, finishing in the 8th position in the number 30, a great run for them. This is a team that, again, has been on the cusp of really making something happen. We've seen Poole get a runner-up finish earlier this year, and a great run for him. Poole apparently is going to be out of the truck for another couple of runs, as Bone's run here at Martinsville confirmed him for another couple of starts. So we'll see what happens in the races coming up, even though we just basically have Phoenix and Homestead coming up. So that'll be interesting to see. Jeb Burton had a good run. 9th place finish for him, matching his best run of the season earlier this year, the number 44 car. Cody Rohrbar with his first ever top 10 finish, good flying the flag for the ARCA guys out there, and the Grant County Mulch Chevrolet number 9 started in the 18th position. He also had the presence of mind to jam on the brakes during the accident off of turn 2 that ensued after a great run by Sam Mayer was sidelined by a big pileup that started with everybody going 4 wide off of the corner that barely has enough room for 3 on a clear day. But that ended up being a situation that opened the doors for a lot of competitors. Dawson Cram tweeted the other day that the truck that he ran, the number 33, actually I think David McQueen was tweeting this, but Dawson was also mentioned in it as well, that Dawson's truck was actually built back in 2000, which rivals the Age of Freak, the truck that the famous restrictor plate truck that NASCAR man and I did a video on a couple months ago. It'd be very interesting to hear more about the number 33. And Cram himself was running at Phoenix last year, so I'm certainly hoping that he runs back out there again, because I believe he was 16th last fall, which is a fantastic run for him and for that truck. These are always the interesting stories that we hear along the way, even when they're fielded under different entries. This time around being under Josh Realm's team, whereas it was under DJ Kopp last year. Gus Dean looked like he had a top 10 run going, ended up getting drop kicked out of the running there towards the end and finishing the 14th spot ahead of his teammate Talladega winner Spencer Boyd. Looking further back, let's see. Norm Benning had a frustrating run there at the end of the race. Was determined to not park his truck at the end, despite some significant damage suffered in a late race accident in turn 1. He ends up falling out of the event after 163 of the 201 laps, finishes in the 24th position. Jennifer Jo Cobb had a broken axle, or an axle that flew out onto the track. Axle issues again, a big storyline between both Dover and Martinsville. Certainly we've seen that between Joey Logano and Reed Sorensen back at Dover. And then, of course, today, Chase Elliott at Martinsville. It was the same issue that sniped Cobb. Excuse me. Allergy season still very much in season here back over at Last Car headquarters. But mentioning Brett Moffitt now has a uphill slope to fight up now after his 29th place finish. He'll certainly be one to watch at Phoenix after his great run, the number 16 last year to punch his ticket to Homestead. He'll certainly be one to watch. But at the bottom of the field again was Cody McMahon. We got several interesting reports about issues with the truck during practice and qualifying, where they didn't complete any practice laps and ran very much off the pace in qualifying. This was very similar to the issues that I saw when Ray Cicerelli was driving the truck at Mosport earlier this year. I heard the same accounts of the truck running really rough and sounding just off, and ultimately was a factor in the truck not running very fast. There was even word about the truck not being allowed to run because of a potential wiring issue. Full details of that are going to be in the article that's going to be posted a bit later tonight, as well as the 4 pictures provided by the gentleman I mentioned earlier. So, a wild race at Martinsville. No shortage of action on the track. Cautions and wrecks aplenty. Lots of great storylines at the front of the field. Ross Chastain trying to punch his ticket into the championship at one of the last available opportunities. A track that, basically started his strong run this season when he won a stage out there in the spring. So many great storylines, so many things to watch, so many things happening. We get a green, white, checkered finish. And what happens? Well, the broadcast just kind of goes downhill. Now, the broadcast wasn't already starting at a high point on said hill, because originally Vince Welch said that they were from Nashville and not at Martinsville. And he almost, to his credit, backed out of it while saying it, and then tried to cover up a little bit because Nashville is, of course, in the news a lot, trying to get back into the NASCAR news these days and return to the schedule in some form. And he addressed it. He didn't just pretend it didn't happen. It showed he had a good sense of humor about it, and he showed that he mentioned it. But of course, there's been a lot of issues with these broadcast groups lately, especially on the Fox side of the aisle here, and especially with the Truck Series, and doing a lot of this remote broadcasting where they're not even at the track, and they're doing the very least that they can with the non-essential personnel at the not at the track. And it's unfortunate that the play-by-play is really sacrificed by that, because like we saw actually today during the Cup race, a very good thing happened. During the big pileup that happened off of turn 4, you notice Dale Jr., who in the past has said that he cannot comment on anything that's not shown on the screen, took the opportunity to not look at the screens and look at the track and say, hey, Kyle Busch is spinning in turn 4. And then the camera moves to that scene and everybody catches up to the action. That is a very good thing that happened. That is taking an active role in broadcasting. That is what made the old broadcasts on ESPN and ABC and, even the early Fox broadcasts as good as they were, because they were catching things that weren't just on the monitors in front of them. I think that there's just monitor overload, that there's just so many screens and you got your phone and you got all this stuff. I do the same thing on mine. I mean, there's a lot of screens I'm looking at. Sometimes there's stuff I miss, but it's also not my job to go up there and say what's happening. And that's why, again, big kudos to Dale Jr. on that, for doing that. I thought that was a fantastic moment. And it's something that I think he can lead by example on. That's something that all these broadcasters need to be doing. The other thing that needs to end, I think, quite honestly, and I noticed it much more in fast forwarding through today's broadcast, skipping the commercials and everything, was a lot of this question and answer thing between the broadcasters, where somebody is asking, somebody's like, well, what is it? What does it mean? Like, how hot does the brake rotor get at Martinsville? It's like, well, it's an interesting question. The brake rotor usually gets between 1,000 and 1,100. It's like, you realize how much time that takes? Like, leave it to the person to offer that information if they feel like saying it. How about that? Like, if they point out, says, oh, look at that. It's like, well, the brake rotors, they go between 1,000 and 1,200 degrees. And that's again, an active thing. Don't turn to the other person and ask them a question. No. Focus on the action and tell us what's happening. So this is a long roundabout way to get back to the Truck Series race and the disaster that unfolded at the end of the race. Now, again, not the worst thing in the world. But again, as I always say, I demand professionalism from professionals, and I think we all should. I think, if you remember the movie, I'm going to forget the name. I wanted to say Spotlight, but not that one. I was thinking of the one, Whiplash. If you remember the line that J. Jonah Jameson's original actor is saying there, that there's no two more harmful words than good job. I think that it translates a bit into these broadcasts these days. It's like, there's no two words worse than saying like, oh, he's like, oh, good coverage. Or it's like, oh yeah, it's just like, it's amazing coverage or something like that. I had that more clear in my mind, but you get my point on this. If you have these broadcasts, like I think the two words is like that's more harmful in the context of broadcast. And when you have these professionals that are consistently, like, again, the occasional gaffe that happens, things happen all the time, especially on live TV. That's excusable. I think you can't go too far on that side and then completely nitpick everything to death or anything. But if you have a situation where they are consistently not even getting basic information right, like what track they're at or what's happening or showing the last 2 laps of the race, these are big problems. These are big problems. And I think the 2 more harmful words are just saying, oh, that's okay. Or I guess that'd be 3 words. Oh, that's okay. No. That's not okay. That's not okay. And I know we live in a time with social media where everything is outrage culture and everybody has a reaction to something and they're saying like, okay, I'm not happy about this. I'm not happy about that. We're complaining about this. We're complaining about that. There are some examples of that are clearly, really just, way too far out in left field that are just either some people just trying to get attention or trying to, try for any number of reasons. I'm not going to speculate on any of that. But the problem is when all comments are treated that way or all criticism is treated that way, because there is such a thing as legitimate criticism. There's such a thing as constructive criticism. And there's such a thing as pointing to certain things and saying, look, this wasn't good. And this wasn't good because A, B, C, and D, and if they fix that and they improve on it, then okay, no problem. I'm not going to then, harp on it even more. It's like, oh, that wasn't, no, that wasn't even the right way. Like if there's progress being made, then that's something better. But if there's these broadcasts where for whatever reason or reasons, they don't bring a full broadcast group out to all these truck series races and they're out there and they're just only commenting on what they see on the screen because it's all they have in front of them. They're not given access to the track. So, okay, there's some limits there, but you can work with that. You can work with the pit reporters and everything and try to make that work. But then when everything just completely flies off the handle, that you can't get the last 2 laps of the race broadcast and you cut to a screen and then you just have the continuation of the broadcast. Now maybe they didn't know what was happening and then it cuts back into it. And they're just and the problem is the play-by-play is again so passive versus active, like we talked about with Dale Jr. there. It's so passive that when you just hear the broadcast by itself, you can't picture what's happening those last 2 laps. And then you show that clip later on, and there's everything happening. The 18 gets spun out, Chastain makes a move and almost spins himself. There's other guys wrecking down the front straightaway. There's all this stuff happening. And just by the broadcast, you have no other idea what happened other than Todd Gilliland winning the race. And that's not good enough. That's not good enough. Then you come back out of it. You come back out of this broadcast and show 5 seconds of not even enough time for Gilliland to do a burnout or anything. And then you cut right to a college football game. Now, okay, the race ran long because of a red flag and there's time constraints and everything. But if the network is going to show that little interest in the sport and that little interest in actually showing what's happening and not giving the broadcasters the access they need at the tracks to do decent broadcasting and not giving them the direction they need to do proper play-by-play and not give them the proper notes to improve that play-by-play, then they don't deserve to have that contract. And I stand by what I said earlier on this. And, going full circle back to the social media thing, I try to be careful about what I'm tweeting about stuff like this because I know that there's a lot of moving parts that I may not be privy to. But this is unacceptable. This is absolutely unacceptable for NASCAR to be treated this way, for NASCAR racing and to be treated this way, to be treated as an afterthought on this network. If they are not going to put in the effort, if they are not going to do something to make sure that these broadcasts go as well as a college football game or as any of these other broadcasts. I mean, Kamikaze had the right point. I mean, you don't see this happen in the World Series. You don't see this happen in the Super Bowl. It would be, the Heidi game has fallen into infamy as for just a regular season game for it's being preempted by another movie or something like that. But that's why people came out and said this isn't okay and this isn't acceptable, and it's no less acceptable now. This is a time now where the sport is most visible to the average person or to the fan or to everybody else from what they see in the broadcast. When there's a lackluster call of a race, when there is a lackluster broadcast that is not showing the race shown accurately, when it's not being depicted the best way possible, when it is not handled with the care that it deserves, then people are going to have a negative view of that sport. If the camera is shown too tight on just a couple of trucks and they can't see what else is happening, well, they're going to say, oh, this is just boring. This is like sitting next to traffic. This is going to be like, I'm just watching trucks going in circles. How boring. It falls into all the stereotypes that people have about the sport. It falls into all the negative things that NASCAR has been fighting to overcome and fighting to regain both the fans that they've lost, as well as trying to attract new fans. And when the most visible aspect of the sport is the broadcast, and the broadcaster handled this badly, it diminishes the quality of the sport, because how else is anybody else going to know about it? Not everybody can go to all the races. A lot of times, most people's first exposure to the sport is a broadcast before they ever go to the track. Nobody's going to be shelling out, large amounts of money for tickets to these races if they aren't convinced to begin with that the product is good. Think about this in terms of selling any other product. Like, if you find a product that's advertised and they do a commercial on TV and the commercial is terrible, like the commercial doesn't show you like the product in the best possible light and just shows the product look really horrible, or it's not showing a really good angle, or they just didn't take the care to like make the product look as good as possible or make clear how good this product is, you're not going to buy that product. You're not going to go out there and buy that product. And a broadcast is the same thing. A broadcast is an advertisement for the sport. That's why I always think the commercials are kind of redundant, because these cars all have advertisements on them. There's advertisements shoved in there. But more than all that, the broadcast is advertising the sport. And if that isn't handled properly, then you have not succeeded in marketing the sport. You have failed in marketing the sport properly. And you shouldn't be surprised when people are less interested in the sport. So that's why all of us need to demand more of these broadcasts, because they have the responsibility, not just the job, the responsibility to do the very best that they can to make sure that product is made as attractive as possible to everybody. And I'm not saying gimmicks. I'm not saying hyping things that aren't interesting. I'm not saying throwing a bunch of unnecessary stuff out there. I'm saying just doing the basics really well. You make sure that you show all the laps. You make sure you work some camera angles in there to actually see the action. You make sure you describe what is happening that the fans can't see from the TV. You make sure that everything is described as best as possible. And you do that, and then you'll succeed. You are in the business, without hammering this too hard, you are in the business of marketing the sport that way. And you need to treat your job in that same way. And if people aren't going to be willing to do that, then things need to change. None of us should bear dealing with people that aren't going to do the job to the best of their ability. We should have the right to demand better. And what happened in that truck race was unacceptable. And they're going to keep doing that, and it's just going to get worse. If we just say good job and that's okay, that just happens. It's just going to get worse and worse. They're just people, everybody. They're just people. So I don't want to go too much further down that, because I feel like I've gone too far on that already. But you get what I'm saying. You get what I'm saying. So, and it's been said a lot by enough people already. But yeah. But this is the whole thing with that. And again, yeah. And I see in the comments there, yeah, look, there's a lot of different deals there. And we're very lucky to have what we do have for the broadcast. But again, you can't just, it's a two-way street on this. Just because it's what's available now doesn't mean that that's what's going to always be available. It doesn't mean that we just have to just deal with it at the same time. And then it's a two-way street. On the other side of it, just because they receive concerns or complaints or anything like that, they shouldn't treat all of those as just, that's just free-floating negativity on social media. Not when they're pointing at specific examples, not when they're comparing it to specific things, not when they show other sports handling things differently. And if this network, if one network, for example, or one group isn't willing to do it to a certain level, then it's a capitalist system, just like anything else. Then you go to somebody else that's going to, and you just figure out a way to do it. And whether it's the sanctioning body, or whether it's the network, or whether it's the production crew, or whether it's anything like that, that's where it needs to be figured out. I'm not going to pretend to know all that, because that's well outside my expertise. So And I don't want to just kind of drop all this and say, oh, well, they need to do something better. I think it's pretty clear what they need to do better. So again, I've said enough on that. I said enough on that. That's a different thing on that. But it's an unfortunate deal with this, and it's a trend that needs to be clear on that. So with that, gosh, how far has this gone? We've gone way too far in this. 45 minutes. Oh my gosh. Gone too far in a few places. Yes. So we got everything on here. Anything else that I'm missing on here? Let's see. Truck Series race. We talked about the Cup race. We talked about Denny Hamlin, Logano. We talked about all this. Beating a dead horse on a lot of this stuff here. But, you know, it's all that kind of stuff. And again, I think there's, again, when I say it's a two-way street, I think it is something where, hopefully there's I don't know what the best solution is on a lot of this. I'd love to just say that, like, I know exactly what needs to be fixed. I know exactly what everything needs to be done if they just did simple things. I do think, though, that a lot of the problems that we have with a lot of these broadcasts, or a lot of these things that happen that blur or obscure the marketability of the sport, I don't think that a lot of them are big issues. I think they're just small, really basic things that maybe are easily overlooked because they're small and basic. And I think because of that, I think the good thing to take from this is that they're relatively easy to fix. But you got to recognize that they're problems before you can fix them. And if we don't do that first step, the second one's not going to happen. And I don't know what the answer is going to be. I guess really the best thing you could do is lead by example. Like, you just try to just do the best you can with what you can and try to promote a better way. I think that there's a lot of interesting people out there that are working on trying to make things better, or try to portray the sport in a better way. I mean, it's a big reason that I enjoy doing the work with NASCAR, man. Here's a good transition. We did the video this past week on the Tricky Triangle, the history of the Pocono Raceway, and the history of the Pocono 500 specifically in the IndyCar series. And it was a fascinating video on that. Because I'm not the most knowledgeable person on open wheels. So big credit to NASCAR Man there for a fantastic script again, and a fantastic video that he put together. As I said in all these videos, I'm just very fortunate to be the person who gets to actually record these scripts and provide the narration on them. He does a lot of the hard work and the heavy lifting on those. But fantastic job on that one. Definitely give it a look if you haven't seen it yet. It's on NASCAR Man History's channel there on YouTube. Just got posted the other day, I believe, after the Truck Series race. But it was really enjoyable. It was a really enjoyable deal on that, and I enjoyed actually talking about the action that's happened over the years. I think there's definitely a checkered past in the sport there. And I think that's where, definitely in the sports history, or in talking about the sport in a mainstream context, maybe there's not a willingness really to talk about moments where that there were of great difficulty or great controversy, that you need a third party in there to step in and actually do some kind of a analysis or kind of reporting on a story like that, because otherwise, it's just not going to get heard. I mean, I think about the other ways that how certain events in the sport are portrayed, or certain ones are portrayed in a way that are kind of at the cost of others in terms of not getting talked about as much. But again, that's why I really enjoy NASCAR Man's videos on that. And he does does an excellent job on those. But I definitely have to applaud him for the work that he did on that, and definitely check that out as well. Also, work is still continuing on 3 before February that I'm working on at the moment. I'm getting very close to a release date announcement in a bit. It's probably going to be sometime next month, is the latest report that I've been able to give. Still got some more work going on that. That's going to be it's going to be a very interesting video. Again, very much in the vein of kind of like NASCAR Man's videos, where again, analysis of a time in the sport. that has been, not so much forgotten, but certainly kind of overlooked and reinterpreted over the years, and trying to set the record straight with some firsthand accounts and reports from that same time period. I hope it's going to be something very interesting for all of you. And for those of you who remember that time period, certainly want to make sure that I do it proper justice. So I want to take some more time and get that up there as well. Um, but yeah, it's the overshadowed. Did I say overlooked? Yeah, overshadowed is a better way to put it. Yeah, that's a way to put it. But yeah, so we're gonna get that. We're gonna get that all up there pretty soon. I don't have a full date here yet, but pretty soon. And probably not gonna be before we go to Phoenix. But pretty much around that time. I'm pretty close to it. I mean, well, when you hear about it, the Patreon members will find out about it first, and then I'm gonna post it on Twitter, and we'll have a full thing on that, and we'll keep going. But in the meantime, definitely check out NASCAR Man's videos, and make sure you spread the links too, because he doesn't get as many hits as I think he deserves. I think he does a fantastic job on those for the work that he's doing, and for the research that he's done. He's actually, I mean, his videos are the reason that I'm starting to make my own videos again, because I haven't made videos on a consistent basis in years. And it's good to have a rabbit out there, somebody that's producing content as good as he is. Gives me something to aim at, gives me something to aim for, and try to improve my own work, and see if I can do a video of the same quality of his. So make sure that you share NASCAR Man's videos with your friends and everything. Get those hits up there. Hopefully the algorithm will shine brightly on him, and get more of this racing history exposed. I'm very pleased with a lot of the response that the video has been having so far already, and hopefully things will get better from there. So we covered a lot so far here, racing action as well, and truly wrapped up for today. And I've already said probably more than I need to, but you know what? I'd rather not leave that unsaid. And I know you probably have already heard plenty about all that stuff from every other YouTuber here in the last 24 hours. But hey, I'm not one to leave out my own 2 cents on that. But take it as you will. Take it as you will. Maybe it'll work itself out. We always hope for such things, but I think that there's what we do on that. So let's jump into our trivia segment. We got the Ricky Rudd car right here. We're gonna jump right back into that bad boy, and we're gonna get some more questions on this. So let me bring this back. We're gonna get this here, and we'll get this on here. All right. Okay. So we're gonna do the Ricky Rudd car again. Every once in a while, we get some. Where was the one? I think where we left off last time. The last time we did this, first answer is Joe Nemechek. That's a pretty good guess. Anybody or guesses? Let's open this up to the floor. Who thinks? Who? Go ahead and make your guesses as to what the answer to the first question is going to be. We haven't even hit the button on it yet here, or at least the button for the question yet. Go ahead and guess on that. I think where we left off on this last time, we were given the question, who was the first person to discover drafting in 1959? And the answer it actually gave was, it depends on who you ask. And that was actually the answer it went with. It was either this or maybe it was the other one. I think we were at the other location last time. It was something like that. There you go. NASCAR Sportsman episode, and certainly open to it. For me, myself, my personal Ricky Rudd, that's a good guess. My personal experience, my specialty is more in the Cup Series, just because that's what I grew up with. I'm working on expanding that awareness more to, the Xfinity and trucks. I've only really dug into that a lot more since starting the website over the last 10 years. My Cup experience, well, I guess I wouldn't say experience. I'm not a driver, but awareness, I guess, of the subject there goes back a bit further, more to the start of the sport. And anything open wheels, I'm gonna defer to like guys like David Land and stuff on that. I don't know the first thing beyond that. But yeah, stuff with the NASCAR Sportsman Series, I'm certainly open to that. Anything that really strikes my fancy that I can construct into an interesting story. That's the kind of stuff that really gets me. And I know that's the kind of stuff that gets NASCAR Man too. Like, he'll find something that's just like maybe you don't think about, or maybe you forgot about, and really try to craft that into a story that makes it really interesting. So I think that's why we work so well together, and we certainly look forward to doing some more of that in the future. A sports car story. There you go. Right, I'll keep that in mind. All right, here we go. So let's get the first question here. How many times has Ricky Rudd won the Winston Cup Championship? How many times has Ricky Rudd won the Winston Cup Championship? 0 is the first guess. Any other guesses on that? How many times has Ricky Rudd won the Winston Cup Championship? I was thinking this answer may be Joe Nemechek, but no, I guess this one wouldn't be. We're going to go for a number, and I believe 0 is correct. It's unfortunate. You would think 1991, he should have won the championship. He and Dale Earnhardt were in a battle of attrition that year. It seemed like they both were just equally consistent. Earnhardt just eked him out there at the end of the season. It wasn't really a dominant campaign by the man in the 3 car. And then 2001. Oh boy, I remember that one pretty well. Ricky Rudd finally breaks his winless streak that extended back to 98. Martinsville, he wins at Pocono in June, which is a huge victory. I remember being a kid back then. Well, I guess a kid. I was a teenager back then. I had a Ricky Rudd shirt. And at one point, I got it caught on a fence and it tore a hole in the side of it there. And my mom sewed it back up. She says, it's okay. Probably let the bad luck out. And then he won at Pocono, so I think it actually did. Then he won at Richmond. He won at Richmond that one time. And unfortunately, that was the last race, like right before 9/11. But he did win that race, and that put him in a good position in the points. He had a good run in the rest of that season. He was good at Dover. He was a factor. He is good at Martinsville, but I believe both times he had mechanical issues. Jeff Gordon ended up gapping him for the championship. And unfortunately, the Robert Yates number 28 missed the title again. So that was an unfortunate deal there. But yes, the answer is 0. Ricky Rudd did not win the championship, but he did come darn close at least a couple of times. So there you go. Here we go. Everybody knows Harry Gant is the oldest driver to win a Winston Cup race, but who won first at age 50? Who was the first driver to win at age 50 is the short version of the question. Who was the first driver to win at age 50? Oh yeah, Winston Churchill, you jumped the gun a little bit. You had it right on there. And who was the first driver to win at age 50? Richard Petty is one guess. Bobby Allison. Any other guesses we have here? First driver to win at age 50. I presume NASCAR Cup Series because that's what this car seems to specialize in. Again, very similar in experience that way. Cale Allison. Okay. We're going to do some other stuff on this. The answer is Bobby Allison. Bobby Allison in the 1988 Daytona 500. There you go. Bobby Allison beating his, edging his son Davey there for the win in the 1988 Daytona 500. The first driver to win at age 50. My goodness, took that long. It seemed like Richard Petty would have been a good answer. That was a good guess on that. You think maybe like his wins and his last couple wins, Daytona and Dover and the Charlotte race with the car that had the engine too big and tires on the wrong side and all that. You think that would be one, but there you go. Excuse me. You don't need to hear my nose stuff up there. Okay. Next question. What is the degree of banking at Dover Downs International Speedway? Now, this is 1998. What is the degree of banking at Dover Downs International Speedway? We have the first guess is at 24. We have another at 28. Any other guesses for what the degree of banking was at Dover Downs in 1998? 22, 23, 20. Oh, we got a tight grouping of guesses here. The answer is 24 degrees. Said head 2. You got it, man. First guess was the one that was correct. 24 degrees. The Monster Mile. All right. Next question. How many times has Ricky Rudd won the Winston? Oh, wait, what the heck? It's asking the Winston Cup Championship question. Okay, skip that. We got that answer already. None. Okay, moving on. Next question. What does loose mean? Oh, that's the only question. What does loose mean? The full term is bonus points if you get the exact wording that the car predicts it's going to be. Oversteer, What does loose mean? Pretty sure you guys got this. It's just a matter of I want to see if any of you guys get the exact wording that the car is going to actually say on this. Oversteer is pretty good. Fasten on the edge of out control. I like that. Back end wants to spin around, aka understeer. There you go. I think you mean oversteer on that one, like set head 2 got. All right, let's see. What wording does it actually give? It says loss of traction on the rear tires. Loss of traction on the rear tires. So Brentana, you basically got pretty close. Actually, a Beast of Metal 1989, you got pretty close on that too. So there you go. Yeah, it's you never tell with this thing like how specific the question is or how specific the answer it actually wants. It's kind of a little bit of mind reading you gotta do with this along the way. Alrighty. Who is the oldest driver to compete in a Winston Cup points race? Who is the oldest driver to compete in a Winston Cup points race? The oldest driver to race in a Winston Cup points race. James Hilton. Okay, any other guesses on here? Herschel McGriff. Oldest driver to compete in a Winston Cup points race as of 1998. Again, because we have the old 98 Taurus right here. So Morgan Shepherd, yeah, no, they're good guesses. We got several good guesses. Jack Sellers, another very, very good guess. There you go, digging deep into the Winston West guys. That would still count. Because Winston West did those companion races. That opens up another whole bottle of potential answers. All right, Morgan Shepherd, we got several guesses here. Let's get the answer. Herschel McGriff is the answer, who I believe was also the oldest driver to finish last in a Cup Series points race in 1993. I don't remember I think Shepherd was close to that when he finished last at Phoenix a few years ago. I have that up here. Let's I can pull up that stat for you guys here. Since Phoenix is very much the theme here of this evening. Oh, nope, we don't need that one. Let's get this one. Oh, it's 2014. Excuse me. Yes. Okay. So, yeah, Morgan Shepherd's run at Phoenix in 2014. Morgan Shepherd was 72 years, 4 months, and 18 days old when he was the oldest last place finisher in the history of the Cup Series. But as of this car right here, the one it's referencing was Sears Point in 1993. Herschel McGriff was 65 years, 5 months, and 2 days old. So that was the record back in 1998. So Herschel McGriff is the correct answer. But Morgan Shepherd, bonus points for you guys because that's pretty much the answer today. So there you go. The ageless Morgan Shepherd. That's another driver I'm hoping to see over at Phoenix. I know that Landon Castle's been running his car a lot here, but with Shepherd running one of his last Cup races, or at least one of his most recent Cup races, rather, at Phoenix, there's always the possibility of him running there. He did run that race last year, which is the time of that. Gosh, yeah, you were 2 in 1993, man. Now I'm feeling older than usual, but there you go. All right. Let's see. Next question. I'm going to get a couple more here, and then we'll let you guys go. I know it's getting late. Who won the championship the year Ricky Rudd finished second? Okay. Who won the championship the year Ricky Rudd finished second is the question. Now, this is as of 1998. Who won the championship the year Ricky Rudd finished second is the question. Dale Earnhardt, Dale Sr., any other guesses? Any other guesses we'll have on that? Dale Earnhardt, yep, 91. Yeah, you guys got it. You guys got it. Dale Earnhardt. Yes, indeed. Pretty consistent answer on the little car here. Okay. How many races did Dave Marcus win? How many races did Dave Marcus win? How many races did Dave Marcus win? Dave Marcus, how many races did he win in the Cup Series? 6 is the first guess. 4 is the second guess. Go ahead and just punch in a number. Don't look it up on Racing Reference. Just jump right in. 5, 1. Any other guesses on here? The answer is 5. There you go. Beast of Metal, you got it, man. Incidentally, that's actually a typo in the JD McDuffie book. I mentioned that I mentioned Dave Marcus in the book and how many cup wins. I think I got that one wrong. And I said that he had 4 wins. Charlie Birch actually pointed that out to me when I met up with him the book signing thing there. He's like, "Oh." So when yeah, there's definitely gonna be a correction coming in future editions there should that come about. All right, what was his last win? Well, that was Richmond in 1982. Rain shortened one. Joe Ruttman should have won it. One of a number of races at Richmond that Joe Ruttman should have won. It's unfortunate that Ruttman never did. One of the best drivers to not win one. Doesn't really get talked about that much. All right, true or false? Ricky Rudd never drove for Bud Moore. True or false? Ricky Rudd never drove for Bud Moore. Ricky Rudd never drove for Bud Moore. Is that true or false? Get some easy questions cleared out here. All right, you guys got it. You guys got it. False, of course. Shared the Wrangler sponsorship with Dale Earnhardt back in the 80s. And of course, the Bud Moore car was the one that he flipped so violently at Daytona 1984. Goodness me, I need to get a Mucinex after this. Okay. Can a driver contact his crew by radio? Can a driver contact his crew by radio? Yes or no? Can a driver contact his crew by radio? Yes, yes, yes. I'm sure the answer is yes, and there it is. Yes, indeed. Okay, let's get some hard questions on here. Usually when I ask, this thing comes through. This thing comes through, so we're going to find out. Who was the Rookie of the Year that won both poles at Daytona in 1997? Who was the Rookie of the Year that won both poles at Daytona in 1997? 97. Here's a season for the ages back there. Mike Skinner. You know you guys are right. You guys know that you are right. Mike Skinner indeed is the answer. Mike Skinner driving the Lowe's Chevrolet back when Lowe's was not Jimmy Johnson's sponsor. The car that ultimately won its first race finally. I drew a blank for a second there at North Wilkesboro. Oh gosh, I'm getting tired again. I've fallen into Vince Welch territory. I don't want to do that. But his last race at New Hampshire. This is why I don't do a lot of opinion pieces because, yeah, I mean, I hold myself to the same standard. There's a lot of things that I do, I'm sure, that fall into the same group. And it's easy for me to say a lot of these things, but some of these things have to be said. I mean, come on. And you know, when I'm slipping, I know you guys keep me honest, so I appreciate that. So don't forget about, don't worry about that. All righty. Next question. What is the degree of banking at Martinsville? Ooh, this is timely. Speedway. What is the degree of banking at Martinsville Speedway? 12, 6, 8. This is a little bit of reading comprehension from today's race here. If you remember the track description at one point, assuming they still do that, I don't even recall there. The degree of banking at Martinsville, the answer is 12 degrees. Enough degrees that Truex's car seemed to be rolling down that banking there at the end of the deal there. All right, we're going to do one more question here. We'll wrap it up here because it's getting a little bit on the later side here, but I appreciate you guys tuning in this much later here. This is not going to be so much typical in the except for the night races. Homestead will probably be a pretty late show. And Phoenix, we're going to figure out something with that. That'll probably be a wrap-up show the day after, like we did for Sonoma and for Mosport and so forth. All right, here we go. What years did Ricky Rudd drive for Bud Moore? What years did Ricky Rudd drive for Bud Moore? Which years? This is actually a little bit more trickier than you may think. Which years did he drive for Bud Moore? So a beginning year and an end year. The first time he drove for Bud Moore to the end. We have 84 to 86. Any other guesses on there? Beginning year to the end year. 84 to 85. See, it's harder than it looks. Harder than it looks. Playing little mind games here. 84 to 90, 84 to 85, 84 to 86. Any other guesses? Last question of the night. Any other guesses on this? The answer is 1984, 85, 86, and 87. There you go. The last two got that there. Canuck 406 and Drew Burger King Daddy 84 to 87. That is correct. 84 to 87. So, again, a big thank you for everyone for tuning in here for a later edition and a post disqualification announcement, disqualification show. Let me check something right here. Did I bring this along? Yes. And let me check this here as well. This is what I have right here. Oh, it shows up on camera already. I need to keep that in mind if I'm not doing anything like this. I've been collecting some materials for the project that I'm working on here 3 before February. Just a little teaser here to kind of wrap things up. This I actually found on Amazon of all places. Well, of all places, gosh, they have everything. But continuing the trend that Amazon has just about anything that you would want to ever find. I found this copy of a program for the July 2000 New Hampshire race because I wanted to get some other information on there. I wanted to see if there's any mention of Adam Petty in there, any other context, like maybe an article on Kenny Irwin, very similar to the article that Marty Smith did in the days before the accident that weekend. But an interesting bit of history right here. This again being the program for the July race at New Hampshire, which was the race where tragically we lost Kenny Irwin Jr. The original copy of it right here. You'll notice it says a New England 300 at the top of the page there. In the past, if you for those of you familiar for that season, it was sponsored by a company called thatlook.com. This was back when the .com bubble was not quite bursting yet, but it was very close to that point there. But this was at a time where you had mall.com, carsdirect.com, all these other companies that were sponsoring them. The sponsorship during my research on the project actually came together just a couple days before the race weekend. So all the programs don't say thatlook.com on it. So if you ever try to find a copy of this, you have to look up New England 300 on there. So this one here is actually the July issue here. This is the September one. I believe the September one was the Duralube 300 for that one. It's very similar. It's got a blue border on it versus the red one here. But an interesting deal here. There is some interesting stuff in here. But it does not unfortunately have any mention of Adam Petty in it. About the closest thing it does is a picture of him, a picture of his car in like one of the advertisements. There's unfortunately not an article really on Kenny Irwin either, although his picture is shown in among the other drivers inside here. This is, let's see, back in a different time. Let's get that page there and kind of get you some of that. It doesn't have a starting lineup sheet in it. That's just unfortunate. I always kind of try to look for that whenever I can find it. But these programs, sometimes you get some really interesting information in there, and you can get like some better context. Like, of course, you get like the weekend schedule and everything like that. So there's Kenny's picture there at the bottom of that page. So, of course, along with the other driver profiles back then, very early 2000s kind of style there with the lowercase letters and everything. But see, of course, a lot of these drivers at such a younger age too at the time. I mean, here's another page here in the back with Greg Biffle and Kurt Busch in the Truck Series. Well, you can see that there. I mean, it's amazing. It doesn't seem like to me that it's been quite that long ago, but I mean, it's such a different time period there. I mean, just look at how young Kurt there, third one from the top there on the first column there, and Biffle at the top of the column there. I mean, a whole different time period back then. But really, with the project I'm working on 3 before February, I'm really trying to kind of capture that time period as best I can. And it's again, it doesn't feel like that long ago, but it's still, you kind of remember. I mean, certainly the events that happened that season there, and what all was going on there. But it's got I think it's got the scanner frequencies in here too. So I got that. Did I scan that here? I know I did that. I have the entry list. Ken Squire was the Grand Marshal for the event that weekend. Here we go. This is timely. Here's an advertisement for Sam Bass in here. Remember old Winner's Circle? I mean, go far back there. So yeah, that was the different paintings he did, and then of course they did like a die-cast line there through Winner's Circle. Those are pretty cool. The old Earnhardt ones. I mean, gosh, I mean, again, you don't think it's been that long, and then you really think about like how much has changed in that time period there. And again, so um yeah, like a lot of these projects and stuff, like if I try to if it's covering a race or covering an event or anything like that, I think really when you kind of look at something like this, it kind of helps put you really back in that time period, and kind of understanding the context of things back then, and everything. But it is interesting, I mean, certainly by exclusion, like what is and is not mentioned in there. And everything there. But let's see, where is the did I have the let's see. Yeah, there we go. It's interesting. The one thing is kind of interesting. The schedule is a little bit abbreviated. It actually doesn't show the times of the different practice sessions. Like it's got that on the first page here. I don't know how well that shows up on camera, but it shows pretty much the other ones there. They had a stacked lineup there of the events. It's kind of, I mean, that hasn't really changed so much since then. If you actually look at Loudon's page on the Racing Reference, I mean, they have so many different divisions that run there. I mean, this particular weekend had Cup as well as Truck. They had the Bush North Series and they had the Fairlight Modified Series there the same weekend there. But interesting thing. So this is one of the things I'm kind of working with here and kind of getting some information from there and getting that video together there. Again, we're going to have some more information on when the release date is, but it's going to be sometime within the next month. And this will be one thing that we're working with. I actually took an scan of this, and that's in the video as well. And I got some other bonus content I'm working on and putting in the Patreon as well. So you get some more information on all of that. So in the meantime, again, thank you so much for tuning in. I know it's a bit later tonight and everything. Appreciate you sticking with me. I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys go because I know it's getting late on the East Coast. But tune in next week. We're gonna go ahead and have our next show there for Texas. Unfortunately, we're not able to attend that one in person, but we're going to do the disqualification show after that race. Again, we're hopeful that the power outages and everything like that are going to cooperate. We were very fortunate this week in this particular case, but we'll see what's going on there. Certainly, our thoughts are with the people out there that are dealing with the fires that have been going on. We've had some very blustery weather here at the headquarters in this area. And I know that the firefighters out there are working very hard to try to contain everything as best as they can, both in Northern and Southern California. It's always a hair-raising time of the year, and we certainly hope that things turn around for the better. As for the whole thing with PG&E, hopefully that things work out better on that end as well. There's a lot of people. I mean, when people that are losing power, for some people like that, I mean, for anybody, I mean, just think about all the things that everything is plugged into. I mean, it's so much that that people depend on and everything, and I certainly hope for the best for everybody who's dealing with that as well. So again, thank you everyone for tuning in, and we'll see you guys next week for Texas. And any other updates we're going to have over on the Twitter at Last Car on Brock. The Patreon is patreon.com/Last Car on Brock. The website is lastcar.info. The Truck Series article is pretty much done. We'll get that posted pretty soon, and the Cup Series article is going to get posted later tonight. So again, thank you everyone for your support and for viewing tonight, and we'll see you next week.